Racist cop attacks black teen, unaware her father is a powerful judge in town. He thought she was just another kid to intimidate, another case to close. But when the handcuffed girl whispered, "Call my dad, Judge Marcus Freeman," the whole city changed. It started with a simple trip to a gas station, a routine day in Bakersfield, until Officer Ryan Carter's suspicions spiraled into something far bigger than either of them imagined. What happens when justice walks in the form of a teenage girl, and her father happens to be the most powerful judge in town? This isn't just a story about abuse of power. It's about courage, family, and standing tall when the world tries to push you down. You won't believe what happened next. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more real stories that demand to be heard. Imani Freeman stepped off the city bus onto Union Avenue in Bakersfield, California. The sun was still high, casting long shadows as school had let out just half an hour before. It was Friday, and like every Friday, she had planned to meet her best friend, Maya, and spend the afternoon together. But today, plans shifted. Maya's brother had taken the car, so instead, Imani decided to wait at the nearby Arco gas station. She leaned against the cool concrete wall, the familiar gray Ridgeview high sweatshirt hugging her frame. The Panther logo was cracked from too many washes, but it was hers, a symbol of her school pride. Her braids were gathered into a tight bun, and though one AirPod wasn't working, she had one earbud in, scrolling through her phone and texting Maya, "Where you at?" Behind her, a rusty pickup truck rumbled into the lot, music thumping low. People moved casually, nothing unusual. She munched on flaming hot Cheetos, sipping a Gatorade, waiting. Then, the black and white cruiser pulled in. It wasn't the speed or the suddenness that caught her attention. It was the way the officer stopped too close, stared for too long. Sergeant Ryan Carter stepped out slowly, his eyes scanning her like she was trouble. "You waiting for someone?" he asked, voice dry, eyes narrowing. Imani slipped out her AirPod, voice soft but clear. "Yes, sir. My friend's on the way." Carter's gaze hardened. "Why you standing here? You look like you're casing the place." "I'm just waiting," Imani replied. "I go to school just down the street." "Got ID?" he demanded. Imani hesitated but reached into her backpack, pulling out her school ID. Before she could explain, Carter raised his hand sharply. "Step away from the wall." His tone changed, sharp, loud, commanding, drawing curious looks from others at the pumps. "I didn't do anything, sir," she said, confusion flickering across her face. "Hands where I can see 'em. Don't talk back." Her heart pounded as she raised her hands, one still clutching her ID. Carter snatched it roughly, glancing at it before tossing it on the hood of his cruiser. "Are you high? You look out of it," he said. "No," her voice cracked. He grabbed her wrist. "Wait. Please," she cried, panic rising. Before she could finish, he spun her around, pressing her against the hot metal of the cruiser. Her bag of chips slipped from her fingers, the Gatorade bottle rolling into the street. "Stop resisting." Carter barked. "I'm not resisting," she screamed, voice shaking. Gasps broke out. Someone yelled, "Hey! What's he doing?" Phones whipped out, filming. Imani's face was pressed to the metal, tears spilling down one cheek. She didn't know where to look or what to say. She had never been in trouble, never sent to the principal's office, and now, here she was, cuffed in front of strangers. All she could think about was her father, Judge Marcus Freeman. Not because she wanted him to fix it, but because she didn't want him to see her like this. The handcuffs snapped too tight, biting into her wrists. Carter pulled her upright. "You match a description from a call I got." "From who?" someone asked a bystander. Imani looked around, trembling. "There was no call," she said quietly. He ignored her. He opened the cruiser's back door. The cameras kept rolling as more phones came out. Carter wasn't concerned, not yet. Inside, the air was thick and hot. The AC was off. Imani sat stiff, wrists throbbing. Her backpack was on the ground outside, her phone lost in the chaos. The door slammed behind her. Through tinted windows, she could barely see the growing crowd, some recording, others demanding answers. Carter stood by the front, scowling, unwilling to explain. He muttered, "We're handling it," and she matched the description. A woman in scrubs stepped forward. "I saw everything," she said. "She wasn't doing anything." "That's a child," someone said. Carter didn't respond. He tossed Imani's backpack into the passenger seat and radioed quietly. Imani stared at the wire mesh before her, breathing shallow. Judge Marcus Freeman was halfway through a sentencing memo when the video arrived. His daughter, handcuffed and humiliated, caught on camera. What happened next would shake the city to its core. Judge Marcus Freeman barely glanced at his phone as it vibrated on his cluttered desk. Drafting a sentencing memo for a juvenile case, he was used to interruptions, but this was different. The notification was from his niece. "Uncle Marcus, is this Imani?" Attached was a video. He clicked. There she was, his daughter, pinned against a police cruiser, her face twisted with confusion and pain. Her hoodie bunched, her voice cracking as she insisted she did nothing wrong. The silence in his office was suffocating. Without hesitation, Marcus stood. He didn't call ahead. Didn't notify his assistant. His judicial robe still hung on the back of his office door as he climbed into his car and drove straight to the Bakersfield Police Department. Inside, chaos simmered. Sergeant Ryan Carter paced in the hallway, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. The front desk confirmed Imani's identity. Captain Serena Hollow was already reviewing bodycam footage. Marcus cut through the tension. "My daughter is in your custody. I want her released immediately." Hollow hesitated. "We're confirming the situation. There was a call." "There was no call," Marcus snapped. "She was standing outside a gas station, waiting for a friend. This man," he said, pointing to Carter, "tackled and cuffed a minor without cause." Carter opened his mouth to defend himself. Marcus silenced him. "You didn't know who she was? You didn't care. And now you're pretending it was a mistake." Carter's silence spoke volumes. Marcus took a deep breath. "I've spent 23 years building credibility, sentencing murderers, advocating for juvenile programs, and now my daughter learns firsthand that none of that shields her from humiliation by a badge." Captain Hollow nodded slowly. "You're right. She'll be released immediately. We'll initiate a review and preserve all footage." Meanwhile, Imani sat alone in a holding room, her eyes red but dry, repeating her father's number like a mantra. When he arrived, calm but resolute, she barely spoke. He reached out, inspecting the raw marks on her wrists. "Let's go." Officers averted their eyes as they passed. Outside, the heat hit differently, charged with the electricity of justice. The video exploded online, shared from teen to teen, parent to parent. Hashtags trended. Hashtag Justice for Imani. Hashtag Protect Black Girls. Hashtag BPD Accountability. Ebony Rivera, a bystander who filmed the arrest, uploaded it to Instagram and TikTok, where it went viral in hours. Judge Freeman's home was a hub of non-stop calls and visitors. His wife, Darlene, tried to hold the family together, wiping counters repeatedly, a silent storm inside her. Marcus refused interviews, focusing instead on legal channels. "Not yet," he told reporters. "This is my daughter, not a headline." The TV looped the footage. Anchor after anchor dissected Imani's expression, half fear, half disbelief. At Ridgeview High, students organized a walkout. Teachers circulated petitions demanding reform and apology. Imani watched it all from her laptop, jaw clenched. She didn't want to be a symbol. She wanted answers. The Bakersfield Police Department placed Carter on administrative leave amid growing protests and calls for transparency. Old complaints surfaced, patterns of aggression, racial bias, ignored recommendations. The department scrambled, but the community wasn't satisfied. At Ridgeview, seniors launched a petition for youth advisors, education on rights, and officer accountability. It garnered thousands of signatures locally and beyond. One quiet night on the porch, Marcus found Imani staring into the dark, eyes unfocused. "Not sleeping?" he asked. "No," she said. "Sometimes I wonder if I should have been a different kind of judge." He smiled softly. "Some days, I do too. Because sometimes justice feels slow. But right now, you're changing it." Weeks later, Imani spoke at a youth forum. No notes. Just truth. I'm not brave all the time, she said. I was scared. But speaking up made me stronger. The room listened, some nodding in understanding. She answered questions about safety, rights, fear. Her voice was steady, honest, a beacon. The city responded. A civilian review board was established. Retraining on bias and youth interaction mandated. Police policies began to shift. But resistance remained. Police unions defended Carter. Some online commenters attacked Imani. She read the harsh words, then closed her laptop. They don't know me, she told her mom. And they never will. The public hearing was tense but historic. Imani's testimony was clear, powerful. He didn't see me as a person. Just a threat. Her words echoed through the courthouse and the city. Judge Freeman pushed for systemic change, not just punishment. The state attorney general opened an investigation. The Bakersfield community united, demanding justice and reform. But the fight was far from over. Behind the scenes, powerful forces moved to resist change. Would Imani's courage be enough to break down the walls of an entrenched system, or would the shadows swallow her voice? The city of Bakersfield was no stranger to controversy, but the arrest of Imani Freeman struck a chord deeper than most. The footage of her being roughly handled by Sergeant Ryan Carter ignited a fire in the community. Yet, amid the swelling calls for justice, resistance brewed quietly in the shadows. At Ridgeview High School, the halls buzzed with whispered conversations and nervous glances. Students planned walkouts and social media campaigns. Teachers circulated petitions demanding reforms in policing policies, a youth advisory board, public transparency, and mandatory bias training for officers. Imani sat quietly in the library, watching the protests grow online and in the streets. She didn't want to be a symbol, but she was beginning to understand that sometimes, symbols become the spark. Her father, Judge Marcus Freeman, was working tirelessly behind closed doors. His reputation as a fair and dedicated judge now took on new meaning, not just for his courtroom but for his family's fight against systemic injustice. Inside the police department, things were tense. Sergeant Carter had been placed on administrative leave, but old grievances lingered. Records revealed a troubling pattern of complaints against him: excessive force, racial profiling, aggressive behavior toward teens of color, complaints that had been ignored or dismissed for years. Community leaders and civil rights lawyers demanded accountability. The mayor held emergency meetings with activists and law enforcement officials. The Bakersfield police chief announced an internal review but faced mounting pressure to allow external oversight. At home, the Freemans tried to find moments of peace. Darlene, Imani's mother, kept the family grounded, balancing fear and hope. Imani struggled with the spotlight, overwhelmed by the weight of becoming a voice for so many. One evening, as twilight fell, Marcus found Imani on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not just for me, but for everyone who faces this. I want to help, but sometimes it feels too big." Marcus sat beside her. "Change is never easy. But your courage has already moved mountains. We take it one step at a time." The city's response grew louder and more organized. Protesters marched peacefully, holding signs reading, "Protect our kids," and "Justice for Imani." Community forums opened doors for honest conversations between residents, police, and officials. At a packed public hearing, Imani took the microphone. Her voice steady, she shared her experience, emphasizing the need for systemic change rather than isolated punishment. "I want to be clear," she said, "this is not just about Sergeant Carter. It's about a system that allows this to happen over and over." The room was silent, then filled with applause, not performative, but heartfelt. Judge Freeman continued his relentless pursuit of justice through legal channels. He called for a comprehensive audit of the police department, demanding transparency and accountability. Meanwhile, a young officer named Bryce Harmon requested a transfer to community outreach, inspired by the growing movement for reform. Not everyone embraced change, but the seeds were planted. Sergeant Carter remained silent in the media storm, his lawyer issuing denials but offering no real defense. The community's patience was wearing thin. At Ridgeview, students launched a petition demanding safety reforms and greater transparency, gaining thousands of signatures locally and nationally. Despite setbacks and opposition, the Freeman family stood united. Imani began developing a digital resource, Know Your Power, a guide for teens to understand their rights and how to speak up safely. With support from school officials and community groups, the guide quickly spread across the district. As reform efforts gained momentum, entrenched interests pushed back harder than ever. Would Bakersfield finally break free from its troubled past, or would the fight for justice face its most daunting challenge yet? The Bakersfield community was alive with a new energy. The video of Imani Freeman's arrest had sparked something far greater than outrage. It ignited a movement. Students marched, parents organized forums, and teachers pushed for change in schools. At Ridgeview High, the petition demanding a civilian oversight board and mandatory bias training swept through the district, gathering tens of thousands of signatures. The petition's reach extended beyond Bakersfield, capturing the attention of regional and even national leaders. But with every step forward, resistance grew. The local police union decried the reforms as unfair and reactionary. On talk radio shows and social media, voices emerged defending Sergeant Ryan Carter, painting Imani as a tool of privileged power. Some comments turned cruel, aimed at discrediting her and her family. Imani read the hateful messages, her jaw clenched tight. She closed her laptop, telling her mother, "They don't know me. They never will." Darlene, her mother, held her hand. "They don't need to. You said what matters." Judge Marcus Freeman moved with purpose, rallying civil rights attorneys, contacting the state attorney general, and demanding a thorough investigation into Bakersfield's police department. An internal affairs hearing was scheduled. Sergeant Carter would face scrutiny not only for Imani's arrest but for a decade-long pattern of complaints, from rough treatment of minors to ignored calls for de-escalation training. The hearing room was tense. Carter sat stiffly, flanked by his lawyer. Evidence piled up, videos, written complaints, testimonies from victims and witnesses. The panel was clear: his behavior was part of a systemic problem, one that had gone unchecked for too long. Meanwhile, at school, Imani prepared for the next stage of her journey. Nervous but determined, she agreed to speak at a Know Your Rights youth forum. Standing before a room full of teenagers, she shared her story, not as a victim, but as a survivor and advocate. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "I stayed calm. But calm can be seen as suspicious. That's what has to change." Her words resonated deeply, sparking conversations about rights, safety, and empowerment. Outside, the city council voted to create a civilian review board with real oversight power, require bodycam footage release, and mandate police retraining focused on racial bias and youth interaction. Though not perfect, these steps marked a watershed moment. At the same time, some officers requested transfers to community outreach, recognizing the need to build trust. Yet the path forward was not smooth. Some continued to push back, in the media, in city halls, and online. Imani's bravery made her a target for criticism, but also a symbol of hope. One evening, sitting with her family after church, she shared her exhaustion and hope. "I don't want to carry this alone," she said softly. Her father smiled. "You're not alone, and change takes time." As Bakersfield struggled between progress and resistance, Imani prepared to take her voice to the next level, facing the city, the police, and the public in a hearing that could shape the future of justice in her community. The day of the public hearing arrived with a palpable mix of tension and hope. The courthouse lawn was transformed, rows of folding chairs lined up neatly on the grass, a temporary canopy stretched overhead, and a large banner read, "Community Hearing on Police Accountability and Reform." City officials, police representatives, school board members, clergy, lawyers, and concerned citizens filled the room. This was no staged event, it was a true reckoning. Imani sat in the second row, between her parents. She wore a navy blouse, her freshly redone braids framed her calm, focused face. Her hands rested lightly on her knees, fingers interlaced, her shoulders squared. She noticed the variety of faces, some hopeful, some wary, some skeptical, but all here to listen. The hearing began with speeches from community leaders, including Pastor Alton Cares, who called out the department's too many excuses and urged real change. One by one, teachers, public defenders, and teenagers took the microphone. Among them was Malik Winfield, a student who recounted being followed by police simply for looking nervous. The crowd absorbed every story in respectful silence, the weight of shared experiences settling over the room. Then the moderator invited Imani to speak. Taking the microphone, Imani's voice was steady but emotional. "My name is Imani Freeman. I'm 16. I attend Ridgeview High. I want to say something I didn't get to say that day." She paused, gathering strength. "The officer who detained me didn't see me as a student, a daughter, or a person. He saw a threat." Her gaze swept the room. She saw her father nodding quietly. "I followed the rules. I kept my hands visible. I was respectful. None of it mattered." The room was silent, not out of discomfort, but because everyone understood. Imani continued, her words ringing clear. "This is not just about me. It's about how many kids have been treated this way, without cameras, without someone to speak for them." She took a breath. "I'm not just asking for one officer to be held accountable. I'm asking for a system that protects all of us." The crowd erupted in applause, long, firm, and full of respect. Among those clapping was a young Latina officer, standing at the back, her eyes shining. Later that day, the city council announced concrete steps: creation of a civilian review board with authority over officer discipline, mandatory release of bodycam footage within 10 days of complaints, comprehensive retraining programs focused on racial bias, trauma-informed policing, and youth interaction. It wasn't everything activists wanted, but it was more progress than Bakersfield had seen in decades. Yet, change was not without pushback. Police unions denounced the reforms as reactionary, warning of dangerous precedents. Online, some voices turned bitter, labeling Imani a pawn or a tool of privileged influence. But Imani stayed focused, supported by her family and community. She continued to develop Know Your Power, a digital guide empowering teens with knowledge of their rights and ways to speak up safely. One evening, as she typed the last words of the guide, her father paused by her side. "You're making a difference," Marcus said softly. She smiled tiredly. "Not alone. Together." As Bakersfield's fight for justice marched forward, Sergeant Carter's past and the department's history were laid bare. But would this reckoning lead to real reform, or would old habits resist the rising tide? The sun filtered softly through the courtroom windows as the final day of the Internal Affairs hearing unfolded. Sergeant Ryan Carter sat across from the panel, his uniform now stripped of badge and gun, facing scrutiny for years of misconduct that had finally come to light. Victims and witnesses testified, recounting stories of harassment, racial profiling, and aggression. The evidence was overwhelming. The system that had protected him for so long was cracking. Outside, a crowd of community members, activists, students, and families gathered to hear the verdict. Among them was Imani Freeman, standing strong alongside her parents and friends. The panel announced their decision: Carter would be dismissed from the Bakersfield Police Department, and sweeping reforms would be mandated. The city council pledged to continue the push for systemic change, establishing transparent oversight, community policing initiatives, and ongoing training to address implicit bias and youth engagement. Back at Ridgeview High, students celebrated the victory but knew the work was just beginning. Imani spoke at a school assembly, her voice steady as she addressed her peers. "This isn't just my story. It's all of ours. It's about having the courage to speak up, to demand respect and justice." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring a new generation of leaders ready to challenge injustice wherever it hides. Home, the Freemans gathered around the dinner table, sharing stories, laughter, and hope. Marcus looked at Imani, pride shining in his eyes. "You were brave," he said simply. Imani smiled. "I just chose to be heard." In the weeks and months that followed, Know Your Power became a beacon across the district, empowering countless teens to understand their rights and speak confidently. Community leaders, inspired by Imani's courage, began collaborating with law enforcement to build bridges, ensuring that past mistakes would not be repeated. The road ahead remained long and challenging, but Bakersfield had turned a corner. Imani's story, once a moment of pain and fear, had transformed into a movement for change, justice, and hope. If you find yourself facing injustice, remember Imani's journey. Your voice matters. Speaking up is a powerful act that can change not just your life, but your community. Don't let silence win. Stand tall, demand respect, and be the change you wish to see. Thank you for following this story. If it inspired you, please like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories of resilience, courage, and triumph. Your voice can make a difference.